Well, good morning to members of the Record Society and people out who are just catching up on this latest podcast from the Society. This features books which are just out or just about to come out. And this morning we have Paul Holden, who is talking about an exciting project in Cornwall, which should be of interest to us in Devon because it is comparative at the same time. And Paul, welcome and thank you for giving your time.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Can I ask the very straightforward question? Tell us about the book. Start off with the title.
Okay, so the title is The Distinctiveness of Cornish Buildings. And this came about really to celebrate 50 years of the Cornish Building Society, 50 years of an amenity society that was started in 1969 to sort of tackle conservation issues within buildings in Cornwall, but also champion good design as well. So the Cornish Buildings Group not only look backwards at the past, they look forwards at the future and have an amazing award scheme. And the conference was really a way of, I don't know, just raising debate, raising awareness about architectural issues. Our first conference was in 2015, and that was to celebrate the publication of the Pevsner by Peter Beecham. And we had a great two-day conference down in Falmouth. And we published the proceedings from that as well, called Celebrating Pevsner, published by Francis Bootle, which carried all the papers delivered on the day. Our second conference was about good design. We didn't publish a proceedings largely because it was a one-day conference, but we invited the movers and shakers, the designer of Tintagel Bridge and Adam Architecture and the Dutch who gave papers on what they were doing about good design in Cornwall. And then the third conference in 2019 was to do with Cornish distinctiveness. And the initiative behind that really was Cornwall Council's drive towards understanding Cornish distinctiveness in buildings and in architectural design. And to understand, I guess, what was unique in Cornish buildings and what we should be capturing in new design and in conservation projects. It was an amazing 2 days. It was sponsored by Historic England and the National Trust. And we managed to get some brilliant speakers down who were talking about building stones, about geology, about archaeology, sculpture, ornament, architecture, ecclesiastical history, domestic buildings. We covered board schools, the cathedral. And for me, as an architectural historian, I particularly was interested in individual architects, and we had great papers on Edmund Sedding and Philip Tilden. Mm-hmm. So we covered such a wide gambit of topics. And I suppose another thing that drove me towards this sort of conference question, what is unique about Cornish buildings, was that I was working for the National Trust at the time, and we did a really interesting project on Spirit of Place, which made you really think about the emotional connection between people and the built environment. So all of this sort of drove the conference theme and attracted really good quality speakers. It was always the intention, I remember someone once said to me that a conference isn't a conference unless you get a proceedings published. Yeah. And as I said earlier, we published the first conference proceedings, and we managed to get a fantastic publisher in the shape of Sean Tyas. I'm sure your viewers will have heard of Sean Tyas and maybe have several of his books on their shelves. And Sean was so enthusiastic about doing something sort of provincially Cornish. And we did a huge amount of work on it, as you do, chivied on all the contributors and got everything in. But then sadly, sort of COVID got in the way. And Sean created subsequently had a backlog of production. So it has taken a bit of a time to hit the shelves, but it has hit the shelves now, and we are just so pleased with it. It's over 300 pages, full color printing, hardback, and it just oozes of Sean Tyas' quality of production. So we are over the moon.
Well, the society formed at the time of the Cornishman's house, Veronica Cheshire's book, which, was great 50 years ago, and still has a place on your shelf. I mean, it's, still a lot there, but life has really moved on, and, the way we think and what we look at within building and, the sources.
Yeah.
So when you're constructing your book, you're taking into account so much more. What kind of sources are people using?
Well, any conference, I guess, is a position to showcase research and the latest research. And the great thing about this volume is that none of this research has been published before, so it's a unique volume about unique buildings in the county. You talk about Veronica Cheshire's book. In a way, that is still the go-to book for vernacular architectural issues of that period. It hasn't really been surpassed. And I suppose in many ways, there hasn't been a huge amount of writing since that time on Cornish architecture. The Peter Beecham's work on the revised Pevsner was a bit of a landmark moment, really, because it brought our understanding of Cornish buildings up to date. So the great thing about this book is that it is fully footnoted. It has a very comprehensive index. I think it runs to something like 26 pages, and Sean Tyas did that himself. So it's very, you can navigate the book very easily. I think going back to what I was saying earlier, we attracted great researchers to this conference, and consequently, we've got great chapters in this book.
But you've got the building stones. I mean, it's not traditional in that people are looking at the documents and looking at the written heritage, but you've expanded into ways of using geology, which,
because our building stones make the unique architectural environment we have, the use of granite.
Yeah, it's not Bedfordshire with its bricks, it's Cornwall with its stonework.
You don't find much red brick architecture in Cornwall, and when you do, you sort of take a bit of a double take and wonder why it's there. And I've been lucky enough over the years to get in. I'm a bit of a country house snooper, so I've got into many of the sort of Cornish country houses over the years, and you do see a uniqueness of design. And that's another conversation about, when did design and fashion hit Cornwall? How long did it take to come down from the metropolis via Exeter into our county? And they're very interesting discussions. And my paper in the book on Palladianism within Cornwall really sort of talks about that, and how long did these fashions take to get down to the southwest. But going back to the chapters, Nick Carhill did a superb piece on the work of John Wood of Bath in Cornwall, and he's been investigating this for many years, and fortunately he delivered his paper at the conference, but sadly died soon after. But I'm so pleased to have been able to publish his work on John Wood, because in many respects, it's quite groundbreaking. People didn't necessarily think that the likes of Wood were working down in the southwest, but he was. Alex Woodcock does a lovely piece on the Master of St Endelian and the sort of use of Catacleuch stone. So again, we're tying in a named architect with the geology, with the stones that are available down here. Joe Mattingly did a piece on chancel arches and why we don't have chancel arches down in Cornwall. So it's a piece of investigative research that you won't see anywhere else. And again, small sort of biographical pieces on the work of Edmund Sedding and Philip Tilden. I love the work of Tilden, actually. And the house at Porthon Alls at Prussia Cove. We were just so fortunate to have this fresh research coming down. And I'm sure everyone will agree, what makes a great conference is when you broach new topics and have new conversations about things.
I mean, you've got some, names to conjure with, you've mentioned Joe and that Alex Woodcock, Colin Bristow, Peter Herring, Jackie Noel. That was Jackie's. And I grew up with
I'll leave that to you.
Noel Kalski. But these are some, good names, good solid names. And, you know, in one sense, the book sounds like, you know, how do places at a distance from London, you know, get their styles and develop their architecture, but let alone Cornwall itself as its own unit, not just in relation to London, but as you know, every place has to justify itself because it's not London. You know, Cornwall is its own place. What kind of surprised you by reading through so many contributions? You know, you know, when the reader looks at it, think, blimey, I didn't realize that.
Well, I hope we've tackled the conference question, which is what is unique about Cornish buildings. What is distinct about Cornish buildings? I've lived in Cornwall now for 24 years. I'm actually from Hampshire. So I hopefully over that time have begun to understand, be able to look at a building that is distinctively Cornish and understand it. You know, we have, as any county does, we have our provincial architects, and that comes out very strongly in the book. The work of Sylvanus Travell, for example, the work of James Hicks, the work of Richard Code, the work of Otto Peter. You know, they're names that are not household names, but they brought a distinctiveness to the quality of their built design. You know, we also have a very distinctive landscape as well, and the way those buildings fit into the landscape. So I think there's sort of several aspects of this. It is uniqueness, it is distinctive, but it is also moving beyond the remits of the Tamar and looking further afield. We did have significant architects of national standing working down here. You've only got to go through the index of the Pevsner to see that, you know, William Butterfield was down here, John Soane was down here. You know, many of those significant names like Gilbert Scott and William Burgess and even Fusion, you know, were working this side of the Tamar. So there's this sort of amalgamation of influences coming from the outside, driven by the local building stones, driven by the input of the local architects. And it creates a sort of sense of place, doesn't it? It creates a spirit, a genius loci, if you like, of what makes Cornish buildings distinctively Cornish. Why don't you find our sort of architectural design in Devon or Somerset, Hampshire or Gloucestershire? It is a uniqueness. And I really hope that we have teased that out, you know, through these proceedings. And as the conversation progresses, particularly with Cornwall Council, I think, pushing this distinctiveness agenda, this becomes more of a tool in the planning process, and you know, understanding new design and understanding how buildings move forward using the local materials. So it's a huge debate, and I think there's still a long way to go on this. In a way, Sam Barnes's discussion on board schools and Patrick Newbury's discussion on the design for Truro Cathedral, which is in the proceedings, highlight that very well. You know, that interaction between what's going on nationally and what's going on regionally. So it's a very exciting topic, I think, and one that deserves probably a lot more exploration than it has got. And I hope, again, with anything, our proceedings will sort of set that ball rolling and set that conversation going.
Well, the book is
sorry, I was going to say architecturally, we're very rich down here. We do have an enormous amount of listed buildings. We have a great country house heritage. We have an amazing collection of church buildings down here. Understanding them is well worth the while, really.
I mean, it's clearly a landmark in the writing of architecture and buildings in Cornwall. But I think what's interesting is, you know, we often think, you know, as historians, that somehow we can be irrelevant to what's going on in modern society. And yet this is the sort of research which really informs an awful lot of how we see a county and how we deal with a heritage which, you know, frankly, isn't very well understood by the general public and bringing out issues which they would just drive by without realizing. So, I mean, it's a tremendous service to think all, you know, because everyone who's written that, you know, I'm sure is a volunteer. Nobody's been paid.
Mm.
It's off their own back, their own time. And I mean, this book, here we are 50 years after Veronica Cheshire's book, and it's still worthwhile. You know, it'll be another 50 years where your book is still going to be, you know, having a strong impact. And to think 2073.
And I guess as historians, we want to find the uniqueness of a topic. You know, we don't particularly want to write things about topics that, you know, the major work has been published on. So we all seek these new sort of insights. Many years ago, I published a book on the Lanhydrock Land Atlas, which was a set of 17th century maps. And the amount of people, even now, what will be 13 years on, who are saying that, you know, that has been so instrumental in how they use that for their research. It's the go-to volume to understand the 17th century landscape of Cornwall. And we all hope that our work will become that landmark volume. I've been working on a book on the Cornish country house for, goodness me, nearly 20 years and still haven't got this work out. Because like Hugh Mellor's fantastic volumes on Devon, the subject has become so vast, you sort of don't know where to take it, whether to do it as a gazetteer or whether to do it as a narrative history, or look at the design features or look at the patrons. Where do you go with it? And, you know, I was so lucky actually to get a platform in the Beecham's work, to be able to sort of decant some of that research that I've done into the Pevsner. And that's a lovely thing, you know. Peter, as he always will do, will give you a wonderful dedication and gratitude for your help, and you sort of fall into that contribution to a landmark volume. You know, it's always around, isn't it, the Pevsner?
Yeah, very
so
much.
We all aim for that sort of thing, and I would love to think that at some point my country houses work will come out. It comes out in dribs and drabs. I publish in the Georgian Group or the Royal Institute or the Journal of Historic Buildings and Places. And so I push a few things out, but I would love to collectively make a landmark volume on that. But that's for the future.
Yeah, but anything of worth always needs that time for considered research. That's the thing. Well, how does a reader find your volume? Is it online? Is it best through the publisher, bookshop?
Well, Sean doesn't actually have a website, so Sean sort of does rely very much on word of mouth and selling these things at conferences. However, saying that, he can be contacted, and I've written down his email address here, which is Sean, that's SHAUN, at seantyas.myzen, myzen.co.uk. Alternatively, you can just put into the search engine, and I tried this morning, Cornish Distinctiveness WordPress, and that takes you to the Cornwall Buildings Group Buildings at Risk blog, and I've put the contents of the volume on there and how to get it. Or you can go through the Cornish Buildings website, which again can be found just through a Google search. So there are three relatively easy ways. It is £35, which I think actually, you know, for a hardback proceedings, I think is good value. And as I say, I think Sean has made a fantastic job of it.
So it's called The Distinctiveness of Cornish Buildings.
Yes.
Edited by Paul Holden.
Edited by Paul Holden.
2023.
It is. It's been out just over a week.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the book, and thank you for giving your time. For anyone watching, we're going to be posting the details on our Facebook page as well. So if you look back to today, which is the 18th of March, 2023, we'll have details on how to get the book. But thank you again, Paul, for taking the time. I
really appreciate it.
You know, it is an important service, and it's very easy to dismiss what we all do. But it's the rarity of what we do and how, you know, how seldom these things come out that shows you, you know, just how difficult and important it is as a contribution, I think.
And I think we mustn't forget, it is it takes up a huge amount of time of everyone involved. You know, the process, as you well know, as others will well know, the process of pulling this together, chivying everyone on, illustrations, checking text, proofs, working with the publisher. I can't, you know, when you finally give birth to something like this, and I think you do give birth to something like this, you sort of sit back in your chair, breathe a huge sigh of relief and think, right, I will never do that again. And then within 4 weeks, you're starting again on something else. And I don't know why we're wired that way, but it can't be healthy, I'm sure.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you again. And we look forward to your book coming out imminently.
Hopefully.